Well, jeepers! You're listening to Smash or Pass.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our series finale of the Scooby Doo interviews. I am JB, and of course, with me is Millie.
Hi.
We have Dan.
Hi.
We have Sophie.
Hey.
And the special guest who we'll be interviewing today is Mr. Matthew Lillard. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me, you guys.
Oh, it's an absolute honor to have you here today. Like, genuinely, we were kind of debating for like the last 30 minutes if this was even real. So it's an absolute surreal experience to have you here. So just thank you so much again and welcome to the show.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I know you guys talked about the movie. To be fair, it was 1 billion years ago. So I don't know how much I remember about it, but I'm happy to discuss whatever it is you guys want to discuss.
Oh no, of course. I mean, it was celebrating I think it's 22nd anniversary this year, so it's definitely a while ago. But I guess some softball questions to start off with to introduce you to our audience, even though you probably need no introduction, of course. You've been involved in so many iconic things such as Stu Macher in Scream, Shaggy in Scooby Doo, and quite recently, William Afton in Five Nights at Freddy's. But before all of that, going way back when, what really inspired you to go down the path of acting?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I am a product of I was an obese teenager. I moved when I was the most awkward age possible. I have a severe learning disability. I had glasses, I had braces, and I sucked at everything except for acting. And so at some point in eighth grade, my dad said to me, you can either take an acting class or a typing class, because they used to have typewriters and typing classes. And I was like, well, I'll take the acting class. And that basically started a journey for me that, still goes today. And I'm 54 years old and I have been chasing it sort of ever since.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think I must say, I think if we all got given the choice between typing and acting, I'm going to say a good 95% of us would have wanted to be on the acting side.
I mean, the funny thing is that a lot of people wouldn't, right? I mean, there's so many people out there that the last thing they want to do is be in front of people. The last thing they want to do is be like sort of, center of attention. And I think my dad saw in me, well, first of all, he thought I'd be a great salesman at like eighth grade. He's like, someday you're going to be a salesman like I'm a salesman. So I think he wanted me to like have the ability to stand in front of people and to present themselves. And, to his credit, all along the way, every step of the way, my mom and dad never said no. I mean, I didn't graduate eighth grade and be like, I want to be famous and I want to be a professional actor. I just kept doing the stuff I really loved to do. And as I kept going, nobody was like ever like, hey, that's a bad idea. So it just eventually ended up finding success rather than desperately chasing the idea of being famous, right? And I think that there was like a natural love and passion that went into it that kept propelling me a little bit more forward every time. So yeah.
That's amazing. And was there ever kind of like a specific direction you wanted to go in and that you've always thrived, say, certainly in the horror genre? Was there ever any movies, actors that inspired you into a specific area?
No, not at all. In fact, I always say that thank God I didn't get a soap opera coming out of acting school. I would be doing a soap opera like 30 years later. Not that there's anything wrong with soap operas, but I really love the career I've had. No, I mean that the thing is that one of the joys is that you don't know what's next. I mean, if you are comfortable with jumping off a cliff every time a job ends and just hoping that someday another one will appear, there's a real sort of joy in it. I mean, I did a movie with, we did a musical version of Love's Labor's Lost with Kenneth Branagh, and you're like, you can't plan for those things. You can't plan to be William Afton in FNAF. I mean, you're, like if you believe that the universe is infinitely full of opportunity, then you have to be open to whatever happens next.
Yeah, that's definitely a good bit of advice. And I know a lot of our audience are aspiring actors and voice over artists. So is there any advice you would give to our viewers who want to sort of follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, my advice is always find people like you, right? I mean, the goal is like to be out there and to find class and find other people that are on the journey with you. Find the people that understand what it is that you're going through, what it is that you love, and you want those people around you, right? It's that thing, like you have to build fellowship, you have to build community, because that's the thing that actually at the end of the day makes the whole thing worthwhile. It's not a movie opening or getting paid. Really what makes it joyful is being surrounded by other actors. I mean, you know, we do play readings in my house every 2 weeks, and we have people from, you know, in our backyard reading plays, and that's not about anything else other than hearing great words and spending time together. So to me, the first thing I always say is find the people that you want to be surrounded by and spend as much time with them as possible. And then training, right? It's like there's people out there that are like, I want to be an actor, and they're 50 some years old, and I'm like, great. The first thing you have to do is collect the last 30 years that you haven't been doing what all these professional actors have been doing. Like it's training. It's a craft. It's not, you can't just sit down and be like, I want to build shoes, and the next day you're building shoes. Like, or you can, but the shoes, nobody's gonna buy those shoes, right? You have to learn how to make shoes. You have to learn how to take it seriously and to put time and effort and energy into being great. I mean, I think that is there's an element of that makes this job eternally satisfying, because you're always trying to increase your craft and become a better, like a master of what you do, right?
I love that. Great advice. I think the sense of community is also a really important point to make. Moving on to Scooby Doo, you first played Shaggy in the 2002 live action Scooby Doo movie. Prior to that point, how familiar were you with the Scooby franchise?
Well, I grew up with it. I mean, just like you guys, I'm assuming, seeing how there's Scooby stuff everywhere. I grew up with it. So I grew up in the world where, you know, Sunday morning cartoons were the only time you got to see cartoons, and or Saturday morning cartoons. Sunday only had like 2 or 3, but Saturday morning I'd get up and watch cartoons, and Scooby Doo was a staple. So yeah, so I knew it very well, and I knew Casey had done the voice, and so by the time when they were doing the casting for the movie, I was like, well, I'm tall, I'm skinny, I might as well give this a shot. So I did.
That is absolutely fantastic. And of course, as we kind of discussed off camera, this movie is celebrating its 22nd anniversary. So a little while ago, but do you remember what the audition process was like and what stages you took to prepare for that?
Yeah, I do actually. It's so funny. I have pretty vivid memories around it, actually, which I don't think I have any vivid memories around a lot of auditions, but this one I do. It was during the Al Gore. I was shooting 13 Ghosts in Vancouver. It was during the Al Gore kerfuffle against George Bush. And so that was just the slice of history I was in, and my wife and I were in we lived in Vancouver because I was working and I'm like, I'm never gonna get this job there. I knew that they were going after people like, you know, very famously like Mike Myers was auditioning, and Jim Carrey was the first person they talked to, and you're like, oh, you're really looking for huge celebrities to play this guy, and I'm not going to compete with those guys. But it just so happened that the people that were producing it were my manager's partners, so my management company was actually producing the movie. It's Chuck Roven and Richard Zuckel were producing the movie. And so because we had inside track, they're like, no, we really want to see a bunch of people before we go make crazy offers. And long story short, I flew down because I was working, so I couldn't just go down during normal days. So they were starting auditions on Monday, and I flew down on Saturday before the audition started. And I'll never forget, I was walking around the neighborhood in Vancouver, and I'm like, how do you do the voice of Shaggy? Like, I don't know how to. I'm not a guy that does impressions. That's just not, I've never been that guy. You know, some people are like, I can do it. I can't, that's not how my mind works. And so I remember walking around this small little quaint neighborhood in Vancouver, like sort of like, like screaming myself hoarse, like, but quietly, like trying to just thrash my throat and my instrument so that I would come out scratchy, like talking like this, like Scoob, you know, and So I flew down early morning. I had to fly back right afterwards. So I flew down, audition, jump back on a plane to go back to Vancouver. And I was the first one there, and I was preparing because they had these 3 scenes. And I met with Raja and the director, Raja Gosnell, and I think James Gunn was there. And then Richard Suckles preparing for the audition, and Chuck Roven, who's the executive producer, walked by and like knocked on my windows. I'm sitting in this empty parking lot at Warner Brothers studio, and I'm screaming in my car, ah, ah. And he walked by and he kind of knocked on the windows like, dude, are you okay? Like, what are you doing? And so yeah, I was like, yeah, I'm just preparing. I'm fine. But then I went in, I did the audition, and it went really well. I knew it went well in the moment. And, I think that they spent the next couple of weeks trying to find this guy, and they eventually came back to me and made me an offer. So I took it, and the rest is history.
That's amazing how you put all that, like, I want to say effort, but it's also like that kind of getting into the character mentally as well. It's so incredible because there's one thing preparing for a role, based quite close to you, but another thing I'd imagine to think about going to Tangalooma Island and Australia, and just the whole thing that really I love about the movie is all the sets as well. Like, what was it like to film and work in Australia and also to be a part of those big set pieces?
Yeah. So yeah, oh, by the way, I have to make a note. Sorry, I have to call Neil Fanning back. Neil Fanning, who does the voice of Scooby, just reached out to me for the first time in 100 years. So I have to call him back. Thank you for reminding me. Look, it had nothing to do for me. It had nothing to do with Tangalooma or Australia. I auditioned, and you're not given that information up front. So for me, auditioning was the big deal because you're trying to take a 2-dimensional character, a cartoon, an iconic sort of, a person that people know and have obviously a deep love for. And you have to take that 2-dimensional idea and translate it into a 3-dimensional person. And so that was, that transformation of that sort of creative process was pretty intense. It was actually fun. I have 2 friends of mine who are great actors. Carmi and Bill Rayor, they're a married couple. And I was like, how do I do this? And we're sitting there talking, and they're like, well, why don't we rent like a dance studio for a week? And why don't we just break it down? And so we did that. We took every scene that I had in the movie, sort of talked about like intention, what he was doing, how to do it. We talked about the voice. We talked about the the characteristics and how he walks and how he moves, and sort of did some clown work around that, like basically like how to interpret this thing that into a physical reality. So that was like hugely helpful. And I'd never done that before, and I haven't done it since, quite frankly, because I've never had a character that had that kind of demand before, that a need to really represent, like, not creating out a whole cloth, like my interpretation is the interpretation. But with Scooby Doo, everyone has an impression of what that character is. Everyone has a love of those two, certainly of Shaggy and Scooby. And so trying to translate the weight of that creative process into actual work was super challenging and really lovely.
Yeah, that translation of cartoon to live action is one of my absolutely favorite parts of the movies. And we spoke to Bill Bowes, and he actually still has the cardboard model of the Old Man Wickles house from the second movie. And that was, of course, based on the intro of the first original show. But when it comes to like accuracy to the cartoon and whatnot, are there any of those set pieces or those designs that stand out to you as being, your favorite in hindsight?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Look, Tangalooma Island, when you saw it in real life, was pretty magical. What you see on screen is what was there. We had like 118-year-old man and like 218-year-old man and 218-year-old men and women for all the exterior stuff. So like there was like this little encampment of Aussies who like every night would like have a karaoke contest, and like they had like their own special vacation. and we would, we lived on Tangalooma, so we were like on these little sort of eco houses, and it was an amazing, magical experience shooting in Tangalooma. But I would say that, that experience specifically was the most like sort of like everything else. You're in a studio and it's like one set, and they've built like all these cool places. Like Bilbo's work is incredible in that movie, but Tangalooma felt real because you were like sort of living in it. By the way, I want to point out that's the Luna ghost.
Oh, is that the
I
rock
just
kid?
realized.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
That is amazing.
It's
Uh,
good. Anyway,
And you were talking about the locations there. I mean, the movie is iconic for so many reasons, from the sets to the incredible cast, but also it's raised a lot of questions as to, it was always rumored that there was another version of it. There was a lot of deleted scenes, which over the time of us doing this, we've been fortunate enough to speak to Kent Bader, who shed some light on things, but also Richard Suckle recently saying about an extended version of a scrappy scene. Is there any scene from the movie or any jokes that were cut that, you either particularly enjoyed or, you would have liked to have seen in the movie?
Look, that the legend of that has grown far beyond, I think, whatever it would have been. This idea that Velma was gay, I think would have been super powerful, right? I mean, there's all kinds of kids out there that would have identified with that and been able to like sort of like be lifted in that moment. So this idea that subversion of like her sexuality, because it would have gone over kids' heads and parents would have got it, which, as kids grow into that movie, it could have been super powerful. So that's the one thing. I mean, look, there's definitely a crassness and a level of humor about that only James Gunn can do. He's an incredible writer and was like really taking some great swings. And, they made the movie. The movie was fantastic. It was super funny. That scrappy scene's great. But they, at the end of the day, were like, Warner Brothers views Scooby Doo as like the crown jewel of their, IP, their intellectual property. And so they thought it was more important to protect the integrity of what people would expect rather than invent a new sort of tone, which I think made it all the better. I think that, my experience on the convention circuit and like talking to kids and not kids, men and women, is that movie is way more popular now than when it came out, and it represents something to all your listeners and all of you. And there's like this, there's a beloved, it's entered this space of being a beloved movie for people. And who knows what would have happened if that movie, took that swing. Right now, it's a pretty iconic film for this generation. And so, for better or for worse, I think they made the right choice at the end of the day.
I think it is, like you said, it's definitely stood the test of time. I think, it's still a strong 20 years later, and I know it's going to go into the next generation as well through all of us. And so a part that people really do highlight in that movie is the relationship between you and Neil Fanning, the voice of Scooby Doo, who you just mentioned, and we had the privilege of meeting last year. Certain parts of that as well, like the scene where you have the fight scene and manage to interact with something that wasn't even there at the time. What was it like for you two to work together?
Well, he was a godsend. I mean, Neil Fanning was like, there's a great story. Did he tell you his audition story?
Oh yeah, he had like a voice off, and then he was like
Yeah,
ad-libbing
no,
different lines.
yeah, that was a big deal because that was sort of like or him winning the job, but him getting the job was pretty funny. So he was, I'll tell it as quickly as I possibly can. So he was, as he told it, as I remember it, so it'll be clear, it was again a gazillion years ago. He was doing like a gaggle group, which is where they basically take group sounds or human people talking in the background, and he was doing scout group, and this guy was working on the sides to audition for Scooby Doo to play the on-set voice of Scooby Doo, so that I would have somebody to work with, or we would all have somebody to work with. And so basically, this guy was like trying out, like Neil Fanning's like, well, what are you working on? And he's like, they're doing this voice, and Neil goes home and calls his agent. It's like, I got to get in on this audition. And so the agent calls him back, saying, sorry, they've already got their guy. And Neil goes, oh, well, it's too bad because my dog's name's Scooby, my other dog's name's Scrappy. And he goes, and like the agent was like, oh my God, hold on a sec. He's like, get in your car and drive down to the casting office. So he goes to the casting office and says, hey, my name's Neil Fanning and I want an audition. I'm like, sorry, we got the guy. And Neil Fanning goes, and he's like, oh my God, go to production office. And he goes to Richard, and Richard's like, we already got our guy. They got this guy here. He's supposed to say hi. Casting sending him over. And he goes, we already got our guy. We hired the guy. And Neil's like, I hear you, but and he's like, holy shit. So they threw him in a van. They drove an hour and a half into the rainforest in Australia. They walk up to Raja Gosnell, and Raja's like, who are you? He's like, I came to audition for the on-set voice of Scooby Doo. He's like, I think we have our guy. And he goes, well, I'm supposed to do this. He's like, okay. So they fired the other guy and brought Neil Fanning in, and Neil became instrumental in the success of that movie. I mean, we literally would be like, what would Scooby do? And everyone would sort of look at Neil, and he's like, he'd probably do this. So, so much so that we shot the second movie in Vancouver, and I pulled one of the few power moves of my entire career and said, I'm not going to Vancouver without Neil Fanning. And so I don't know what you have to do, but you've got to figure it out because he has to be there. He is integral to the success of the movie. You can't just move off of him. He's the voice in the film, and he's like, he's the only thing I have to work with. So they did, thank God. And he, and then he went on tour. Like we went on international tour, and he came with us to Japan, to Germany. I think he went all over the world with it, which was great for him.
Yeah, oh, that's incredible. And Neil is iconic as the voice. And I know you mentioned the sequel, Monsters Unleashed, just there. How exactly did you approach preparing for that film, compared to the first one?
Well, it's funny. I was shooting another movie I was shooting Wicker Park in Montreal, and I had just had a baby. So my first daughter, Addison, was born on the day Scooby Doo came out.
Oh, wow.
Which is crazy. So I was in the hospital holding my daughter, my firstborn, and Mike DeLuca called and said, congratulations. I'm like, oh, thank you so much. She's beautiful. He's like, no, we just greenlit the second movie. So it was pretty funny because it was like, oh, that was a good day. That was a good day for me. But anyway, and so therefore I always know how many years have passed since the movie came out because it's the same age as my kid. But I had put on a bunch of baby weight, which Shaggy and Scooby are like in this tight little thing, and I was like, oh, I gotta get in shape. And as I got in shape, I was doing this movie, but it was cold outside, so I rented a treadmill, and instead of like watching sports or something, I put on Buster Keaton, and so I watched hundreds of hours of just watching Buster Keaton work. His physical comedy was great. And I'm like, oh, this is a great sort of like launching off point to sort of invent or rework on some of the physical stuff. So yeah, so that's how I started. And then, getting back in there, it was like it'd been a hit movie. So all of a sudden you had like, Seth Green showed up, and there was like a bunch of like fun cameos, and it was a fun experience across the board.
Yeah, no, the second film is definitely, I think, just as iconic as the first. And a lot of fans actually prefer Monsters Unleashed. Is there any particular favorite scene you have from the sequel?
Not real. I mean, I think that scene with Peter Boyle where he walks in, and that's Scooby Doo, right? Where he's like, what is his name? Shaggy McShagster or something like that.
Like Shizzy McCreepy and SD McCrawley.
So stupid. Yeah, I think that's fun. I don't really. I had to be honest. I have not seen that movie in. Isn't like yeah. I mean, I like that movie because I felt like there was like Raja Gosnell like sort of allowed me into like helping craft scenes. Like if scenes weren't working, I'd go behind the monitor and sort of like James and Raja would say like, "Hey, let's show you a playback." It's something I was like, "Let me see, because I want to see what's work. I want to see how it looks." And I learned a lot about myself as an actor, like trying to craft comedy out of a scene. Was really good for me in that movie because those two men are super influential in my life, and they were allowing me into like the creative process and not of just being a pawn of the story, but helping them do the best version of the movie we could.
Well, there's so many iconic scenes within both movies. I think it's really hard to tell, have a specific one. But did you keep any props or gifts from the set of either movies?
I did. I was hit in the face with that snapping claw on the wall of meat, and puppeteer hit me in the eye and scratched my retina. So at the end of that, he literally came up and gave me the puppet. So I have that puppet, and then I have costumes from the second movie. I have a box of costumes that, whatever. But it was before the days of like, I don't think I really cared about taking things from movies. I still don't. I have very few things in my office that are movie based, but I do have this though. Hold on a second. I just saw this. I was like, oh, this is fun. At some point, I think this was another producer.
Ooh.
So it's like this hanging.
Oh my gosh.
That is amazing.
It's pretty cool, right? It's heavy too.
That disco skull is so iconic from the movie. We were
Yeah.
discussing it in an interview recently because so many people have said that's the one thing they'd want to take away and trying to work out
Yeah,
where
that
it
and the
was.
Arnuki beast. That and the Arnuki beast.
Yes,
are
the
top-
Arnuki beast.
The top ones.
I think we've interviewed
Arnuki Beast. Which one? What's that one? What's
It's
that?
the voodoo maestro in the first one holds up this weird little alien thing that apparently protected him from the spooky demons. And so many people wanted that, and no one knows what happened
We've
to it.
interviewed about 5 people that said they wish they'd taken that from the set.
Oh, that's so funny. I've seen a bunch of skull tattoos, like a bunch of
Mhm.
mirrorball skull tattoos, which is kind of crazy. These choices people make. Yeah, so I wasn't really a big fan of, I didn't really take a bunch of stuff.
You've been the voice of Shaggy now since 2009. What was the process like for you, the transition from being on camera, the live action Shaggy, to having to convey all your performance vocally?
Yeah, it's a totally different set of tools, right? I mean, the voice actors are incredible. I'm gonna be super clear. I do one voice really well, and then everything else I pretty much suck at. But voice actors, I don't consider myself a voice actor, are incredible instruments. I mean, the difference between a Grey DeLisle, a Frank Welker, a Kate Micucci, when you put them in an animated movie versus like a celebrity, is night and day. Celebrities are terrible, in my opinion, terrible in animated films, terrible. And all those films should go to people who do it for a living because their skill set is incredible. But Hollywood uses people's names to sell tickets, and that just lessens the quality of the film. So anyways, I'll step down off of that soapbox. The great thing is that, for the first 10 years of doing Scooby Doo, I sat next to Frank Welker every single day and we worked together. It's like, a scene, and we're working together and adding stuff and improvising things. And to me, that is the best part of that job, is like getting into a booth and seeing your friends. As an actor, like I go back to what I started with, like, fellowship's such a big deal and community is such a big deal. And as an actor, as you're traveling along, you can go a year without seeing anyone unless you create the opportunity. And the good thing about that opportunity, that job, was that every Wednesday from this time to this time, I sat with those 4 friends, and then other people came through. You've got, I mean, every time you call somebody to do Scooby Doo, they'll say yes. And so, there's just everyone in the business would come through. And so that to me was the best part.
And the thing is with animation as well, there's also scope to have so many different versions of the same character as well. Like when you think about the most recent iterations of the Scooby Doo shows, there's a lot of people that's favorite is Mystery Incorporated. A lot of people's favorite can be Cool or Guess Who. But for you personally, is there any version of the Scooby Doo show that if you could go back and do another season, there's one particular flavor that you'd most like to revisit?
I would do Mystery Incorporated right now, not for free, but I would certainly back into that series. I thought that series was great. I thought Mitch Watson was a great showrunner for that. I think they really pushed the boundaries and opened up, honored the genre, honored the history, and pushed it into your generation, right? Instead of a kid. And that's what I think. I think that that's why it was so successful. And now it's more successful, I think, than all of them because it still works and people are still finding it and still watching it multiple times. So that to me would be the one.
It certainly was very successful. I know they still show reruns of it now on our TV. It's the most commonly shown series. So it's
Really?
still. So it certainly is one that I think we'd all love to see a return of. And speaking of returns, you recently announced the second FNAF movie's release date, dressed as Springtrap with posing with Scooby Doo. So was there any inspiration behind that picture? Can we ever see Mystery Inc. solve the mystery of Freddy Fazbear's or anything like that?
Those two will never meet. Those two is not a matchup anyone wants or needs. No, I just Jim Henson does the costumes for both, and it was too great of an opportunity to pass up. And really changed my social media in a crazy way, which was like almost like millions of hits or something. So that was fun. Like I thought that, but fans of both franchises would get a big kick out of it. So yeah, and I also made an announcement that I'm doing something new with Scooby Doo, with something with Warner Brothers. That's not a movie. And it's not a cartoon. So it's very different and sort of outside the box that I can't talk about yet. But you should definitely follow my socials, or you guys will repost, because that's where we're supposed to make the announcement next month. So it's super fun. It's different. It's based in technology and sort of it's an onboarding thing for kids to come in and sort of meet the gang. And I'm excited about it. I'm working with this really cool team and we're developing something really awesome. So hopefully people love it.
Oh wow, no, that's definitely something to look out for. And in a similar vein, it was recently announced that Netflix are working on a live action Scooby project.
Yeah.
And just given how, obviously, like we've said, how iconic the version was that you starred in, is there any sort of way you hope that they pay homage to those films, or would you perhaps want to make a cameo in that project?
It's a little like the Scream question or the, another version of the movie question. We are journeymen on a career path that, sure, I would love to have some kind of some way to honor the original show, to, sort of give fans something fun. I'm available. I'm doing a TV show right now. I'm doing FNAF in October, but I'm available. Greg, bro, everyone knows that I'm available, and if anyone wants me, they can find me if they need me. But I certainly, that show, my portrayal of Shaggy, all of it is a placekeeper for the next generation, right? There will be, like, I stepped in the shoes of Casey. Somebody will step in my shoes and hopefully continue the legacy with as much love as I try to bring to it. So, I wish them nothing but the best.
Well, you certainly honour Shaggy and you're the perfect casting for it. I think we'd all appreciate a cameo if that was ever a thing. In terms of the future, there seems to be a lot on the horizon, with Five Nights at Freddy's being a 3-picture deal with your involvement with the new Stephen King adaptation. Are there any upcoming projects you can talk about at all? I know you've touched on some of them already.
Yeah, I'm doing a TV show for Amazon right now called Cross, which is great. It's their season 1 is releasing next month, I think. And then I'm in season 2, so I'm in the middle of doing that. And then I'm doing other things. Like I have this Dungeons and Dragons company called Beetle and Grimm's. So we do high-end box editions for D&D, which is a game that is near and dear to my heart. And I started a spirit company called Find Familiar Spirits, and we build high-end spirit experiences around fandoms. And so, yeah, so I have, if I was just waiting for Hollywood to call, I would have had a very boring life. Because there's ebbs and flows to every career, and mine certainly has had its fair share. And so, in the interim, I've started to do other things that are interesting to me, so yeah, so it's allowed me to, the ebbs and flows have allowed me to be around for my kids, allowed me to sort of start these new entities, to teach a lot. So I do a lot of stuff on the side that have nothing to do with this godforsaken business. That's the truth.
Well, it's absolutely incredible to hear from you, and looking forward to all of those announcements as they come to light. But for people watching, where is the best place for people to keep up with the work that you're doing?
Yeah, social media. I'm Matthew Lillard on, I think, all platforms between, I don't know, I think I have a blue check mark on Instagram, and then I don't know. I don't on Twitter, I know that, but you'll see all my videos or whatever. I don't know. I mean, it's Twitter and Instagram for me for the no, sorry. Instagram and what's the thing called with the
X?
videos?
TikTok.
TikTok, yeah, sorry.
I was thinking of Twitter being renamed as X then. No, like you said, TikTok.
Yeah,
But-
no, I don't really do the Elon Musk of it all. But yeah, so TikTok and Instagram is where you can find me most.
Okay, perfect. Well, we'll be sure to include those links in the description down below. But
Thanks.
that concludes all the questions for today and brings an end to our series finale. So I'd just like to take a moment to say a big thank you to you today for joining. So thank you, Matthew Lillard. We do really appreciate it. A thank you to Dan and Sophie as well for hosting with us, and to everybody that's listened and joined us on this crazy 3-year journey.
So yeah, I have been JayBee.
And I've been Milly. Thanks for listening.
Well, jeepers, you've listened to Smash or Pass.